Hi, I'm Mike Seifert, President and CEO of the National Grain and Feed Association, and today we're on Maryland's Eastern Shore in Salisbury, the home of Purdue Farms, parent company of our longtime member Purdue Agribusiness, and with their chairman, Jim Perdue. So very happy. Thank you for hosting us and joining us on our 125th anniversary, and also for hosting us here in the historic Purdue farmhouse today.
Yeah, great to have you, and we look forward to it.
Thank you. Just starting off, last year was Purdue Farms' 100th Centennial anniversary. I expect that probably was not the 100th anniversary year you were expecting, but just any thoughts you have on that Centennial year, where you've been as a family business, and where you expect to go, and maybe some of the challenges you faced in that last year and how you overcame them as well.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that this whole pandemic happened during that year, because we had people who had been working for at least 2 years, working on events and different things. We were going to have the biggest fried chicken dinner in the Guinness Book, and but we were able to do some things. We gave $1 million to 10 food banks across the U.S., for example, and so we were able to do some of the things we wanted to do. But everything started right here in this house, literally. My grandfather worked on the railroad. He was the first one to go to school, and he got an accounting degree, and worked in the express car, and noticed that people who were starting to make money or buy cars, as it were, in the 10s and 11s and 12s were people who were in the egg business. And so he wanted to start his own business when he was 35, and he had gotten married, built this house in 1917, and started the business, as it were. And he always said it was a banner year because he started his business. He had his first and only child, Frank Perdue, was born that year, and then he bought his first car, which was a Model T with a Surrey top. So 1920 was a banner year for him, and he, and it was in the egg business. There was no meat business at that time. If you wanted to eat a chicken, you had to know a farmer, and you'd go down and buy one chicken, to take back. And that's why, they always talk about, a chicken in every pot back in World War II, because that's when, it started becoming, more of a meat industry. But my grandfather, really the values of our company came from him. Quality. He was known for the best eggs, the best hens, and he'd go anywhere to get them, the best ones. His customers were New York City purveyors, and one of them, for example, the Jewish hospital, was very particular about quality. So quality was a big thing, and of course my dad picked up on quality and embedded it in the company, or reinforced it. But it all started with Arthur: integrity, trust. And those are values we have today in our company, and they really began with Arthur, and we were also in the farming business. We were across the street. We still rent out land to farmers, but my grandfather loved to farm. My dad hated farming, and the stories of him falling asleep on a planter, and the rows of corn being crooked and that sort of thing. And so I do remember when I grew up right across the street, another house. The day that all the farm equipment was out on the front lawn, and it was a banner year for the farmers, and we broke even. So my grandfather decided that maybe this isn't our best vocation. So and the term he always said is stick to your knitting. Do what you do best. And so we evidently didn't farm, and we ended up in the chicken business.
Great story. Question about yourself. What some of our members watching today may not know. Say you have a master's in marine biology, I believe, PhD in fisheries, well-known interest in science and a lot of diverse interests. But I guess question would be, with that background, what brought you back to the family business, but also what did you learn from those studies and that background that you apply here today?
Yeah, my dad said I'm overeducated. So 'cause he didn't finish college. He went 2 years and came back to the farm. But I actually came to work here right after I graduated from college and got married. And I worked 9 months and decided this wasn't the place for me. And I think it's because when you're 21 years old and you don't have a lot of self-confidence, it's tough working in a family business. And whether you're getting a pat on the back because of your name or because you did something good. So I knew I had to get away, and biology was my major in undergraduate. So I went up to Massachusetts and got a master's and worked with growing shrimp in aquaculture, and then ended up in University of Washington in Seattle, working with salmon and oysters and clams and things. Different again, aquaculture was the. So and then that was about 10 years, and then my dad came out and basically sold me on the need to come back. And by then I was pretty confident in what I was doing, and to this day we almost require the next generation. I'm third generation. We have fourth generation in the business, and we want them to work somewhere else. And all of them worked 5 years somewhere before they came in the company. And I think it's a good practice, for a family business, for people to do that. So, and what I learned is, for sure, not to invest in something like salmon culture in the United States, because then if you notice, there's hardly any salmon companies in the United States. They're all down in Chile or in Scandinavia or other places. But I think there is an inquisitive nature of trying to find out why. Curiosity, I think, is a fantastic quality in someone, and not that I'm curious, but it leads you to ask a lot of questions. I have a great time talking to our veterinarian, who's a doc, about raising chickens different ways and that sort of thing. And actually, I live on a farm, and it's on the water, and I lease 10 acres from the state of Maryland, and I grow clams there. So I have about 50,000 clams under culture right now. So, but it's clearly a hobby.
You're using that background.
Well, it's a hobby. I'm not making any money at it, but it keeps me busy.
One of the things we're hearing a lot about today is sustainability and climate. But here in Maryland, particularly the Chesapeake, you all have kind of been on the tip of the spear and out in front of those issues for quite a while, where a lot of the rest of the country maybe is just now experiencing it. It's something you've been dealing with a decade longer. What have you learned from that process? What do you think? What do you think has worked well? Advice you might have for our members of things they need to be thinking about in their own businesses, as this really becomes a part of the broader discussion of agriculture and agribusiness.
Yeah, I think everything we do as a company, is viewed by the public, and our people who pay our paychecks are consumers, and so the image you have, I think, is really important. But we also have a responsibility as a company. I mean, I grew up here, I fish here. The Chesapeake Bay has gone through a tough time, without a doubt, and so we have a responsibility to do everything we can. And so, for example, back in 2001, we built a facility to convert poultry litter into an organic fertilizer, and we have since sold that business to a company that's going to continue that work, but use a biodigester basically to create methane, which then runs electricity and that sort of thing. But again, it's trying to help the farmer have a place to go with poultry litter. In this area, it's ahead of the entire country because we have a phosphorus index now, and all farmers have to test their soil. Years and years ago, nitrogen was the only issue, but nitrogen is soluble. It goes down into the water table. Phosphorus is not soluble. It stays right on the surface, and so if you get too much phosphorus, and there is phosphorus in poultry litter, it'll migrate laterally into a ditch and a stream and a creek in the Chesapeake Bay. So now if you have a certain level of phosphorus, you cannot put poultry litter on your land. But it turns out, I think the vast majority of the farmland is under the phosphorus index that allows them to continue to use them. There are pockets where they've been using it for years and years, and it is too high. So to me, science and measuring is the way to do anything. That way you get the politics out of it. You know, it either isn't or it isn't is a piece of land that you can do. So I think the farmers have done buffer strips. State of Maryland has a flush tax that they use for cover crops and for poultry manure sheds, so that a farmer can store his litter until it can be used, versus putting it out in winter when there's nothing there to take up the nitrogen. So so ultimately, I think that's an important part of it. Because of my background, I have an interest also in oysters, and I chair a group called the Oyster Recovery Partnership, and we put about 1 billion oysters in the bay every year. Because the truth is, everybody talks about nutrients and into the bay. You're not going to stop nutrients going in the bay. And there's too many people moving to right on the water, more wastewater facilities. Even though they're wastewater facilities that are efficient, they still put nitrogen every day, every minute, every hour into the bay. So what you need is something to filter the water. And we have now so few oysters left in this bay from overfishing and two diseases that affected oysters that were brought in here. But if we get the oyster population back to even a half the level it used to be, it'll filter that water, filter the algae out, which are the result of the nitrogen and the phosphorus, and really help the problem get solved. So we have a responsibility, and I think we're doing a lot of things to try to help with that.
I think basically what you're saying is it's admitting we have a role to play, but then, as you said, take the politics out of it and base it on the science.
Absolutely.
Which is not always the easiest thing to do, but I think that's a really important message in these discussions. Your family you're well known, I've lived in this area for a while now, the commercials and the consumer preferences. What are your thoughts on consumer preferences today? How have you seen the consumer preferences change over your career? How's that changed how you approach it as a business? And what do you see on the horizon that are some of the key consumer preferences that we need to be thinking of that we're going to have to meet moving forward?
Well, there's no doubt there's a huge difference between my generation and the millennial generation. You know, the baby boomers really trusted businesses. They trusted companies, that if you said something, it's right. Millennials are very skeptical. You know, they question everything. They read everything. They want more and more information. You know, how did you raise the chickens? What were they fed? You know, what ingredients to put in the finished products? You know, they're very skeptical of big ag. You know, they don't trust big ag, and that's a challenge, because we are who we are. You know, we're not the biggest, but we're certainly a large agricultural company, and so what we have to do is work every day on trust. And our vision for the company is to be the most trusted name in food and agricultural products. So, and that comes from Arthur Perdue, but really it's perfect, I think, for the millennial generation, because in order to gain their trust, you have to be transparent. You have to be upfront, tell them, you know, the things that you're doing. If there's a problem, you need to let them know. And so we spend a lot of time trying to face forward, you know, with those issues with our consumers. We still do the commercials because, you know, I think part of trust is somebody who's owns the business or works in the business is telling you what they're doing, and that's what Dad's great contribution was. You know, is they trusted him. You know, the baby boomers trusted him. You know, if he said he was looking after the chickens and they're this and that, then that's important. So we continue that. My two of my sons are working in the business or in the commercials today, because I'm not sure I can sell a millennial. Although if Bernie Sanders can sell that many millennials, there's possibly hope for me. But as it related to the last election, but I think they can relate a lot easier to millennials than I can. But you know, ultimately, their needs, things like animal welfare, is an issue that really wasn't on the horizon 20 years ago. Today, it's very important, and they want to know more and more about those issues. And so we have an animal care summit every year. We bring 4 or 5 animal rights groups in, animal welfare groups in, for that 2-day meeting, 2 or 3 day meeting, as well as customers, scientists, experts on, because we're really in the philosophy now that a better tasting chicken depends on how you raise it and what you feed it. And so that's the philosophy we learned from Nyman Ranch in Iowa on the pork business, and their whole thing is about a better culinary experience based on how they raise those animals, and in that case, reducing stress, anxiety, and so they raise everything out in open fields. All the moms and the piglets are all running around, and so it's a different way of looking at agriculture. So we're trying to mimic what Nyman has done with the pork and with the beef, actually, and do that with chicken. So we're doing more and more. We're the largest free range. Chickens have access to the outside. We think that's important. But again, animal welfare is just another example of millennials' concerns that we have to address.
So really, your foundational principles haven't changed, and a lot of the things that you would do in terms of agriculture and your animals and taking care, but it's how you do it and the message of how you explain what you're doing, and that the customer today wants to know. Yeah. Don't show me. I don't trust you. Show me. Prove it to me.
Yeah, one of the leaders of one of the animal rights groups said it well at one of the meetings we were in, and and she said, "What we're doing, they're a fan of us, how we're changing the way we raise our animals." And she said, "But it's your job to figure out how to do it economically, so that so the consumer can afford that." And that's exactly right. That's our experience, and I mean our expertise is trying to take that practice and make it economically efficient.
One of the big changes I've seen in my time working in ag, and I'm sure you've seen it even more, is the movement towards, or the desire and a lot of interest for organic. And I forget the exact word, but I believe you also, you're now the largest purveyor of organic meat in the universe, I believe, or saying, but
organic chicken
in the universe. But where do you see that trend going? How do you think we need to adapt ag business as a whole? But also, what do you see the role of the cell-based meats being in that debate, and where do you see consumer preferences going on that front? And how does that fit into that whole dialogue?
Yeah, well, organic, again, our success is based on my dad's philosophy of listening to the consumer. Okay, and so we get 5,000 contacts a month. A lot of them complaints, which we love because that's where we find that we have problems. But we also get a lot of questions. And that's why for example, we got out of antibiotics. They were telling us we don't want antibiotics used. And so we took us 12 years, but we figured out a way to do it. So organic is just another evolution in that, listening to the consumer, and they have a desire to buy organic product. When we bought Coleman organic chicken, and that helped us convert our chickens to organic, because we learned how you can use herbs to take the place of some of the chemicals that were being used to control some of the parasites that are inevitably in chicken. And so we use a lot of rosemary and other things that we learned from them. And then you keep moving forward. I think where we're heading now is, do we even need to have a chicken in a building? Can the chickens be out on the pasture? The way my grandfather raised them was they were on pasture. They were in little huts, so we almost were going back to the future a little bit. But we're finding that if you wanted the better tasting chicken, the more we do of those kinds of things, we can actually start to change the flavor. And that's what we're excited about. So organic is definitely it's got some qualities that are better than traditionally raised chickens. In the meat quality, tenderness, and then if you go to pasture raised, you actually start to get a flavor difference also, especially if you raise certain flowers in that pasture that can affect things, like omega-6s, omega-3s, for example. So it's really exciting to be on that frontier. So we bought a company, and we're now we're growing more and more chickens in those kind of regimes. Now, when you get into, alternative proteins, we came out with a product, Chicken Plus, and it's a combination of vegetables and chicken. So it's more of it's a flexitarian diet where somebody wants, they want less meat, but they want still to eat meat protein. And that offers that opportunity. Plus, of course, we hide the vegetables so the kids don't know when they eat those chicken nuggets they're getting a serving of vegetables in that also. So, and we're exploring total veg diets or veg products. We bought a company called Maxi, and they have one out there. It's still trying to see where that's merchandised in the store. That's a big part of that. Whether that'll be successful. When you go to the cell culture, which you were asking about, yes. Right? I think the jury's still out on that. Years ago, when there was a concern about salmonella, and irradiation was a solution, and it works. If you irradiate chicken, there is not a living cell, bad or good, in that chicken. The problem is people don't want irradiated chicken, and you have to put a Redora on the package if you do it, and if they see that, they're not going to buy it. And to this day, irradiated chicken is never sold. Now, will this? I don't know, but it certainly is a whole nother level of, I think, concern for some consumers. Exactly where did this come from? Going back to that notion that millennials really want to know what's behind that product. So I think the jury's still out on that. We're not exploring that right now. We are exploring continuing with this Chicken Plus concept and with the vegetarian options, because if that's what the consumer wants, that's what we're here for. We're not going to tell them what to eat and what not to eat. What we tell them is, if you want to eat, we're not going to tell them to eat less meat. We're going to tell them, if you eat meat, eat it in a way that you know where it came from. It's traceability. It's how it was raised, what was in the diet. Those are the things you should be asking the questions.
Another question we've heard from a lot of our membership on, or I know a big debate more socially as well, is diversity and inclusion and agribusiness and making agriculture look more inclusive and agribusiness. What have you all done here at Purdue in terms of D&I, and what's your focus and your priorities?
Well, we celebrate diversity. We have 16,000 workers in our harvest plants or our cooking facilities, and we actually have celebrations at different plants once a year, where we put a tent up outside, and the different ethnic groups have a table with they make food, they have poster boards of their country, there's a dance process, or dance, not contest, but basically where the dance of their country is shown. So I call it sharing or celebrating diversity, because it's important to us. Now, in the workforce, we have a chief diversity officer. I think it was 2 weeks ago, we had what we called a day of understanding, all day long throughout the company, virtually. We had groups that would tell their story about what issues they had, whether it was women, minorities, disabled, and what it was like to grow up and what it's like to be in that kind of a situation. So we're doing a lot internally, I think, in that way. Our CEO, Randy Day, is head of diversity, so he works with the chief diversity officer, and I think it's something that you've got to work on, though. It's not going to happen by itself. You have to really push, and for example, we have a board of 9 people, and 6 of them are women on that board. So it's we try to practice what we preach, but I think it's a journey. It's gonna take a long time to get there.
Absolutely. You've seen a lot of changes over your career, I'm sure. And we have agribusiness is constantly changing in the global markets and the consumer preferences we've talked about. 2-part question for you is, looking forward, what do you see as the biggest challenge maybe for your business or agriculture as a whole, and what do you see as a real opportunity that really excites you, that you think is something we could really latch onto and go to that next level?
Yeah, one thing people don't know is that before we had a harvest plant for chickens, our main business was ag, and that was our grain and oilseed division, and that's where the assets were for soybean crushing facility, storage, so and farmer origination, elevators, all around the state here, to get as many, as much corn and soybeans as we could get in. So we've been in ag. And when I grew up, I worked in that area before I worked in a plant, where we harvested chickens. But Dick Willey, who ran our agribusiness for 30 years and just retiring, told me one time, there's two things that can hurt you in ag: the weather and the government. And it seems like we keep getting double doses here. Last year with the trade issues with China, that affected our selling soybeans to China. And then of course, right now we're in the midst of a $7 corn, due partly to that there's a perception of drought as well as a big demand worldwide for corn and soybeans. So, those things are always going to be around. I'm glad we're the only poultry company with an agribusiness as part of that, which I think is a big help, especially if you're starting to look at trying to do futures or do options. It gives us some expertise because they do that every day on the trading desks. So between that and then originating things like organic, there's not enough organic corn or soybeans in this country for our business. And so we have to import some because most of the organic is grown in the interior, but we're on the coasts here and in California. And so it's more economical to bring it in. So they originate all of our organic crops, and they also sell then to other industries, milk industry that buys organic feed supplements. So they're a very, very big part of the total company.
I've asked you a lot of questions. You've been generous with your time, but anything we haven't covered that you would like to say or mention to our members in closing?
No, I think you all do a great job. We've had a long relationship. We've got a number of people here that attend the meetings and are on committees, and I wish you luck in your new role for you, and I think you'll do fine because I think it's a great one of the great ag organizations that we're part of. So we appreciate it.
Thank you, Jim, for hosting us today and for your time. And thank you to all for joining us as well. And just again, thank you to Purdue Farms for their long-standing membership in the National Grain and Feed Association and for the support they and so many of their employees have given us over the years. Thank you.